Hey, boys and girls, welcome to the Angle Fantasy Basketball Podcast. My name is Andrew. I am your host. We are here, per usual, after our Dynasty Rank update to discuss the movement of 30 players within our ranking update. So this recent one happened in February. The way our rankings work is the Dynasty Top 300 list from myself and two of my colleagues here at Angle are combined together to form one average list for us. I think we ended up with a bit over 300 players this time around to account for some of the players that were on our list and weren't on others. So, like I mentioned, there are two other analysts that contribute to our overall rankings, and both of them are present with me to discuss the 30 players that we have chosen to cover in today's podcast. First off, Braxton, thank you for joining. How are you doing today, dude?
I'm doing excellent. I feel like it's been a while since we've done one of these, so I'm very excited to talk, and I'm very excited for the fantasy playoffs coming up here soon.
That's right. It has been. So our last ranking update was in November, and I actually recently noticed that the views on that video have been ticking up a little bit on YouTube. So people, now that football is over, are really starting to trickle back into the NBA and, getting refocused into dynasty basketball too, leading into playoffs. So this seemed like the perfect time to release a ranking update. Hopefully our rank update, well, it did happen before the real NBA trade deadline and probably happened before majority of your fantasy basketball trade deadlines as well too. Mitchell, our other analyst, is with us today. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing pretty well. It's been a while, and since our last podcast, I got a new MacBook. So hopefully my video quality is a lot better this time around. So very excited to test out this new computer.
That's always a fun experience, and your video quality does look better too. I actually forgot that you got that new MacBook until you talked about it just now, and then I noticed the video quality. So good move on your part. All right, so get comfortable, crack open a beer. Let's get into the 30 players that we want to discuss today. So as always for our Dynasty Overlook videos, we go into our top 300 rankings here that is located on our website, and we follow along as we work through the players that we want to discuss. So these players are in order from their rank. We will start off with some top 10 players, and we finish off with players ranked between 250 and 300. So we definitely want to make sure we cater to you deep league dynasty players today. So if you want to find our dynasty rankings, they are available for free at anglefantasybasketball.wordpress.com. All of the content that we produce you can find on that website. So let's start scrolling down here, and this is going to bring us to our first player. So we're going to discuss the player, their current rank, and how much they moved from the November update until now. So we're going to start us off with Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's ranked at number 9 and did not move within this last update. He stayed where he's at. So there's only one player in the NBA who averages over 30 points per game, over 10 rebounds per game, and over 5 assists per game. And that's Giannis. He also puts up 2 stocks per game too. So we just need to acknowledge how good he is. And I really think it's time to solidify Giannis in tier 3 of the dynasty assets. So the way that that we have it here, tier 1 alone is Victor. As you can see on the average rank here, all three of us put Victor Wembanyama number 1 dynasty asset. I think he's kind of in that tier by himself. Tier 2, it's a pick'em. Your choice between any of these next 3 players: SGA, Jokic, and Luka. Tier 3, for a while we were saying that Tatum is in there, and I think Giannis should be in there too. So that's why I personally put him at 6 overall. I really view that 5-6, that tier 3 spot between the main core 4 guys to be Tatum and Giannis, with Cade Cunningham knocking on the door, seeing if there's some room for him to squeeze in there, maybe by early next season as well. So really, there's not a justifiable reason for him to fall as far as he does in very many dynasty startups that I see. I often see him going after pick 10, and he's just not, he's not old. He's the same age as Jokic. So I don't know if people are just not picking him because he's old, or if it's because there is at least a couple of categories that he is not great at. So anybody who's comfortable selecting Jokic in the top 10 should also be very comfortable selecting Giannis there too. We got to also remember that Giannis is a very late bloomer. Remember what he looked like and played like when he first got drafted. So I personally think his prime is going to last a little bit longer than most, which is an additional reason why I don't think he should be considered to be old. So if you punt free throw percentage, Giannis is a top 3 player. Free throw percentage is a very common category that people punt, and he's so elite at other categories that we should not let his free throw shooting turn us off to the idea of drafting him or trading for him in Dynasty. Really, the categories he's bad at are the ones that are most often punted. So, for example, free throws and turnovers. Our second player discussed, now ranking at 15th, he rose up 4 spots, Domantas Sabonis.
Yeah, I've been really high on Sabonis for the last couple years, and it seems like he's finally fulfilling his prophecy as a Jokic light. He's number 13 on the year. He's got 20 points, almost 15 boards, and over 6 assists. With Fox leaving, I'm not entirely sure there's much of a boost here for him, but he's definitely, if he hadn't already established himself as the number one option on this Kings team moving forward. He's got a rock solid nightly floor. I mean, there's not many guys who have a floor like this. He's an Iron Man. He's easily worth consideration as a top 15 asset. I've got him as high as 9. I know you guys are a little bit lower on him. But the concern for him coming in this year and in previous seasons is he didn't take any threes, right? And now he's making over 1 per game. He's shooting a career high from the three-point percentage. Stocks really aren't there, but that's not why you're drafting him, right? He's that Jokic light. He's the points, rebounds, assists, and a little bit of threes, right? The free throw is something that could use a little bit of work, but the high volume field goal percentage more than makes up for that. And it's the same way you can kind of build around Jokic with any players. I feel like you could do the same thing with Sabonis, and he's somebody who, if you draft him, you're most likely winning rebounds pretty much every single week, depending on who else you surround him with. But it's pretty tough to lose rebounds with a guy like Sabonis. Yeah, and he's just I think he's one of the safest picks you can make. I think in the top 15 here, if you were to take him as a top 15 asset. So.
All right. So our next player we're going to discuss has made a pretty big jump. So even though the amount of spots that he jumped up is not that big, the territory of the Dynasty rankings in which he jumped up this amount of spots is actually a pretty big deal. So we're only going to move 1 spot down to number 16, a player who rose up 15 spots. So going from outside of the top 30 to now inside of the top 20, that's going to be Amen Thompson.
So there's been a lot of talk about an alien in San Antonio, but Houston went up to space on their own in their rocket ship and found their own alien in Amen Thompson, who's probably the best athlete in the NBA. So since our last update, Amen Thompson has thrusted himself into the starting lineup ever since Jabari Smith's hand injury. And during that time, he's averaged 16 points, almost 10 rebounds a game, 5.5 assists, 2 blocks and 1.5, or sorry, 2 steals and 1.5 blocks on pretty good shooting split. So kind of think of like the Giannis type of percentages, maybe not as high in field goal, but a little bit higher in free throw. And over those last 2 months, he's ranked 16th in standard 9 category leagues on a very low usage rate of 17.3%. So when you think of traditional stars, Andrew, your video talks very well on it on his Dynasty outlook. He's that unconventional star. He produces on low usage rate because he's like a super role player. He doesn't necessarily need the ball in his hands for elite production compared to those NBA stars that carry that usage rate of over 30% or higher. So think of like Giannis, Jokic, Luka, SGA. So with that being said, imagine that usage rate rises where he's more of a focal point on offense. We could be talking about Amen Thompson in the top 10 as soon as next year, and we still haven't seen that full potential. And one last thing before I end this talk on Amen Thompson, something very interesting happened over on Twitter or X, whatever you like to call it. Noah Rubin put out a poll between J-Dub, Jalen Johnson, Amen Thompson, and Darius Garland. And Amen won convincingly with over 50% of those votes among those players. All guys pretty safely into that top 15, top 20, besides Garland. And that says, you know, paramount about Amen Thompson's potential and how people value him as a dynasty asset.
Very good. Okay. Next, we are going to move down a little bit to number 21. So this player did not move at all in our rank update, and that's going to be Evan Mobley. So Mobley probably did deserve to move up a few rank spots, but this range ahead of him is just so full of killers. I think that's really the only reason why he didn't manage to move up a little bit. So there is notable improvement in scoring and three-point shooting from last year, while, I mean, the rest of his stats have remained largely the same. But that points per game increase is a big deal for 9 category leagues. And it's likely a big reason why he has been a top 20 player this season for 9-cat. He's got a decent assist to turnover ratio. Even the free throw percentage is respectable for a big man. It's above 75%. So that's not necessarily, killing your free throw percentage on a weekly basis. He's pretty safe in that regard for someone who is a true big man. So he really doesn't hurt you anywhere. Like I said, he's got a good assist to turnover ratio. Those turnovers are low. The free throw percentage is not anything bad. And he obviously shoots well from the floor too, and then provides in pretty much every other facet of the game. So he is a true 9 category player, that's for sure. He's an integral part of this Cavaliers team and is currently a pretty strong defensive player of the year candidate now that Wemby has gone down and won't be eligible for a postseason award. So although Mobley doesn't produce amazing stocks in 9 category leagues, there's aspects of his defense we don't see in fantasy that are so crucial to his success as well as the Cavaliers' overall success too. He's a big reason why they're in first place in the East right now. So we would have zero concerns over any type of playing time reduction, usage reduction, anything of that nature. If anything, they're actually using Mobley more. That's a big reason why they're doing so much better, is because he's more of a focal point on both offense and defense. Even on offense, he's being used as like a point center at times to allow for better spacing and actions among the Cavaliers shooters. Okay, let's move down 3 spots to number 24. This player went down 4 spots and moved out of our top 20. That's going to be Donovan Mitchell.
So I'm going to briefly talk on Donovan Mitchell, and I won't go too much into detail. But the reason the drop in rank is not because of his performance as a player. It's mostly due to his minutes per game going down due to this offensive scheme or, Kenny Atkinson's rotation, where he tends to thrust his bench and trust his bench a little bit more than a JV Bickerstaff. His rank drop in redraft settings dropped from 10 to around 30, and it's really a dip in those volume stats, points, rebounds, assists, and steals. And not, I don't want to say he's gonna, I don't know how I'm gonna say this, but Mitchell isn't a huge drop because the efficiency has maintained. It's really just those volume stats, which is a direct correlation of those minutes per game. So, uh, you know, he should be fine. But I will say long term, since the Cavaliers are looking pretty successful with how they're managing minutes and, the wins being the best record in the NBA, this could be for the long run, at least for the next 2 to 3 years. But Donovan Mitchell is still a top 30 player and should be taken in the rounds 2 or 3 in redraft leagues moving forward. So still a pretty good asset, just not in that top 15 category that we've had him since the beginning of the season.
And that's a great point, Mitchell. He did have a small drop, more so due just to how good the Cavaliers are and his minutes being reduced a little bit. But this next player had a little bit more of a fall from grace from our top 20. So coming in at number 27, he dropped down 10 spots. That's going to be Paolo Banchero.
Yeah. So Paolo might be bad, like actually bad. He's ranked 219 on the year. I know he was injured. I believe he's played 25 games now. The percentages are absolutely disgusting. He's shooting 41% on almost 19 shots per game. And he's making less than 2 3-pointers per game. Okay. The free throw percentage, 67% on almost 8 free throws per night. That is an anchor, or not an anchor. No, it's kind of an anchor, but not like the good kind, right? It's gonna drag your free throw down. The points are fine at almost 23, and he's got some flashy counting stats with the rebounds and almost 5 assists per game. There's no stocks though. The turnovers are super high at 3, and he's just not a good 9 category guy. And honestly, I think there's an argument to have him even lower than this. And I think the only reason he's at 27 for us right now is because he still kind of projects as that alpha on that Magic team. But if you look just two spots below him, Franz Wagner is creeping up on him in terms of fantasy value and dynasty value at 29. And I don't think it's very long now before Franz either passes him, in real life as the alpha on Orlando, also passes him in terms of a dynasty asset. We know for sure that he's a much better redraft asset at this point. We're all kind of banking on Paolo figuring it out with the efficiency and the turnovers, which I don't think the turnovers are ever going to get better, right? But it's we're giving. I think we're giving him a much Paolo. The community as a whole is kind of giving Paolo a much longer leash than he deserves. As this is kind of the consensus to still have him in this top 30 range. So not really. I'm not really a fan.
All right. That moves us on to probably one of the more controversial dynasty assets that we're going to discuss today. So this guy saw a pretty big jump from our last update, and we're going to go back to you on this one, Braxton, because I know there's obviously a lot that goes into this one. So at number 41, he rose up 46 spots. Is going to be your very own Charlotte Hornets center, Mark Williams.
Yeah, remember a week before the trade deadline where people were like, "Yeah, he's a top 20 asset," and then the shenanigans with the Lakers goes down, and the Lakers lie or get cold feet about him being injured, and for some reason everybody's like, "Oh, the Hornets are gonna waive him," or "He's a terrible asset." This rank that we have him at here, 41, that's factoring in the injury risk. Okay, I want to be clear about that. Mark Williams is healthy. The Lakers drama has no effect for me on his current standing. Like I said, this ranking does factor in those health issues. Do not be concerned about the failed physical, quote unquote, from the Lakers, because it seems all but confirmed now that he should not have been failed on that physical. As far as why they failed him, there was not really any reasons have been given. I think they mentioned it wasn't his foot and wasn't his back, which are the two injuries that he's really been dealing with. Mark himself said that he's not hurt. He is going to be resting back to backs for the rest of the season, but he is going to continue to play heavy minutes when healthy and available. And next year, I think we're going to see him continue to grow. I mean, he's a 2020 threat almost on a nightly basis. I'm not saying he's going to average that, but he certainly has the capability. LaMelo loves him. And on a growing Hornets team, I think Mark Williams is going to continue to be a huge part of that. Do not be deterred by the Lakers stuff is how what I should say.
Yeah, I'm gonna chime in really quick. Mark Williams is a very special athlete and someone who is a big that doesn't hurt you in percentages. So, these are the type of players that are very unique in terms of, there's no deficiencies in his game other than the injury risk. But like to your point, Braxton, we already knew that Mark Williams is a very injury prone player. But when he's playing and when he's rolling, he's so hard to stop. Over the last 2 months, I believe he's in the top 35, under that uh, minute restriction that's recently been lifted. So imagine when he pretty much goes uh, in full force. Mark Williams is going to be a great asset. I know they moved off of Nick Richards, so he is the center of the future over there. That chemistry, getting those lobs from LaMelo are certainly going to help his value. And, he's the type of player that's going to be averaging above 65% from the field. Think of like Daniel Gafford on steroids, who can actually rebound the ball. So, Mark Williams is a great asset. And, we were a little bit low on him in the last rank update, but history tends to correct itself, and he's looking like a pretty big asset moving forward.
I just like to add one more thing. For some reason, people are just unbelievably reactionary with Mark Williams, more so than any other player, I think, just period. I mean, if we remember going back to earlier in his career, he was one of the most impactful defensive centers immediately. And then this year, he has a sample size of 25 games where he's struggling on defense, and now suddenly, in the eyes of certain people, he's terrible and is an awful defensive center. I think he's continuing to work his way back from these health issues that he's had. He is healthy now, and he's just starting to get his groove. And kind of akin to how people were shooting him up rankings up into the top 25, which by the way I think is absurd. Let me be clear, I'm very high on Mark, but not that high. I think we need to have a little bit of leeway here, and that's kind of why Mitch, you mentioned we were a little bit low on him in our last update. We wanted to we were waiting on him to do something. And then even when he was having these games in January and performing at the level he was, we were like, okay, let's hold on a second here when people were having him, jump up that high in rankings. So very high on Mark Williams. I think people just need to relax in general when it comes to him and just kind of take a second to breathe and let him develop.
Yes, what the Lakers say does not necessarily apply to the rest of the league. So definitely good to take that one with a grain of salt. Now, the next player we want to discuss, there's a couple of players today where the Dynasty and fantasy community was waiting on this one. They were waiting for a trade or the decline of a specific player for this next player to officially be unleashed into a bigger role. And that's what happened with this current player coming in at number 46. Big riser, went up 35 spots. It is Trey Murphy.
Yeah, Trey Murphy has been amazing. I'm still kicking myself for trading Trey Murphy for the 11th pick and I think a late first in our bubble league that we all shared together. And I could use him during my playoff run this year. And yeah, Modest Buzelis is someone that we're high on, but I'd rescind that trade back if I could, just like the Lakers. But other than that, I can't. I got to live with it. And speaking of Trey Murphy, moving forward with the Pelicans, the future is very bright. For one, they moved Brandon Ingram. He's now on the Toronto Raptors. And now Dejounte Murray has a torn Achilles. So Trey Murphy during that time has developed his on-ball skills, which resulted his increase in assists. He's a drive threat now, as teams are respecting and closing out him on the three-point line. He's leveraging that athleticism. I believe he participated in the dunk contest like 2, 3 years ago. He's sneaky athletic, with all things considered, and he's attacking the closeout, which has translated his free throws from 2.5 a game to almost 5 now. So he's looking like a true top two scoring option for a team. And he's actually ranked 11th in the season in 9 category leagues. So he's averaging like 22 points a game, 3.2 steals, or sorry, 3.2 threes, 5.2 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 1.2 steals, and a sneaky zero point 0.7 blocks. He's almost averaging 50, 40, 90 splits. So this is a guy who has increased volume. He's taking a good amount of shots, but he's also making them. So the biggest question mark that people have with a Trey Murphy is this production sustainable? After a lost season in New Orleans. So there's going to be a lot of questions on that. But next year, Dejounte Murray is likely out for a majority of the fantasy season as he continues to rehab for his torn Achilles, which will result in more on-ball reps where I project that he can make another jump in production.
All right. So this next player has a little bit of sleeping underlying value. So this is going to be coming in at number 66. He fell down 6 spots. We're going to talk about the other twin today, which is Ausar Thompson. So for starters, do not be alarmed by that small drop of spots. That's much more due to some others passing him than it is him falling due to bad performance. He has held his place within the top 70, which I think is the minimum of where he should be at dynasty-wise. Okay, so we have to remember not long ago, Ausar was fighting a blood clot issue similar to what we now see Wemby dealing with. So Ausar is still on a minutes limit due to this, as it is a major health issue. This is not like he tore his ACL or had a severe ankle sprain or something like that. This is something that has lifelong, long-term, lasting complications that could possibly happen with a condition like this. So it's also why we didn't raise his value a bit, despite him playing well this season. We got to make sure he's healthy moving forward, healthy enough to be in the NBA. So even in a limited capacity with his role so far, his scoring, shooting, and steals have actually all improved. His steals have especially improved. It's almost at two steals per night. So due to the minutes limit, he's only playing around 20 minutes per night. This next piece of information was pointed out to me by Mitchell. Thank you for this. And Mitch, this is a pretty alarming piece of information, honestly, that I didn't really look at or notice, and I think people really should take more stock into, and is why I think Ausar has underlying value. If you look at Ausar's per 36 minutes, it is remarkably similar to the per 36 of his twin brother, Amen, who is now ranked in the top 20 for us. So Amen is already playing close to 36 minutes per night. His per 36 numbers won't look too much different than what his standard numbers are. But Ausar is missing like a 16-minute gap in there. And if you add up those per 36 numbers, it's identical almost in every way to what Amen Thompson is currently doing. So this is your chance to get Ausar now. Because when his minutes become more normalized next season, there's little chance that anybody's going to want to sell him. The Pistons have plenty of incentive to play him as much as he can go next season. If he's fully healthy, he's going to probably get as much minutes as he can handle. Amen is helping winning ways in Houston, and I'm confident that Ausar will support that in Detroit. All right, we're going to move down a few spots to someone who took a pretty big drop in this update. Coming in at number 70, he dropped down 30 spots, is going to be Dejounte Murray.
This is a big hit for us salary fantasy GMs out here. Dejounte Murray has a great contract, but unfortunately for majority of us, that doesn't matter in Dynasty League, since non-salary is the predominantly favorite among players. And since that 2021-22 season, I mean, regardless of the Achilles injury, Dejounte Murray has regressed every single year, namely plummeting those field goal percentage and points this season. And his only jump in categories this year, I believe, are rebounds and those assists, because he doesn't have to coincide with Trae Young anymore and sharing that offensive load as the playmaker. So regression paired along with an Achilles injury that will force him out for the majority of next season, along with this season. It's a recipe for a pretty drastic rank drop. Someone who we had pretty comfortably in the top 50 is now in that 70s range. You can argue he'd be even lower than that. So you really do have only two options. You either sell now and hope that someone is willing to send you a top 100 young asset that you believe can jump in value into Murray's level, or you just sit on him for 1.5 years. But I would probably prefer the former and trade him for someone you believe that can rise in value, because typically when you're injured throughout the year, your rank tends to drop down, down, and down as players progress forward and we add a new rookie class. So Dejounte Murray is someone that I'd be looking to sell if you can potentially get a top 100 asset that does have upside. So don't trade him for someone like a Jimmy Butler or I don't know, like a Paul George. Don't do that. Trade him for someone like maybe a Stephon Castle, or maybe a Zach Edey, a Donovan Clingan, or a Kel Ware, someone that can eventually jump, if not already, um, Dejounte Murray in value.
And I'll kind of piggyback off of that too. Like what you mentioned with the preferred route you would take is to trade Dejounte. And I agree that his drop in dynasty rank is justified. And there's really not much to say about, the stats regressing a little bit too. They have. I think the Spurs version that we saw of Dejounte is gone. But Mitch told you to focus on getting somebody within the top 100 for a reason. And that's because Dejounte is still useful. Please do not sell him for pennies. That's why I want to chime in here and make sure that you're not letting Dejounte go for the first healthy body that you can see. So There's obviously plenty of examples with Achilles tears, and that's what I want to kind of focus on here. Obviously, there's the Kobe Achilles tear. His was pretty late in his career, so we're not really counting that as Kobe got taken out of his prime by that or something like that. He was already kind of on the downslope there. KD had an Achilles tear and is still playing to this day. I think really the main basketball-related Achilles tear, career-ending, ruining Achilles tear we can think of, or I can think of, would probably be DeMarcus Cousins. But just the overall science of Achilles surgeries and repairing a torn Achilles has drastically improved. And the number one example I want to point to is Deron Holmes. Many of you might not be familiar with him. He's the rookie that was drafted out of Dayton by the Denver Nuggets. A lot of us in Dynasty were very excited about him, but between the draft and Summer League, Deron Holmes tore his Achilles. That time period, that's around that June to July time period. We are currently in February, so not even a year removed from that date, and Deron Holmes is already doing on-court work with the Denver Nuggets. So I just wanted to throw that out there. All right, let's move down a little bit to somebody who has skyrocketed up into the top 100. Coming in at number 84, who has moved up 61 spots, is going to be Malik Monk. So a massive jump in rank has Malik Monk now finding himself pretty comfortably in our top 100. And this good-sized boost was pretty long overdue for Monk, honestly. He has fully absorbed playmaking duties in Sacramento with Fox gone and has taken on a larger scoring load. And he's really just doing incredibly well. So for a guy who was thought to be a black hole on offense when he was initially drafted, this just development in his game is so crazy to see. Like when he was reviving in his career in Los Angeles, I never would have assumed he'd add over 5 assists per game into his arsenal. So Monk still being the lethal scoring threat that he always has been, while adding those assists, has him as a top 70 ranked player for 9Cat this year. He's only 27 years old, so he's not old at all. He has a comfortable window of his prime remaining, and he has a very team-friendly contract too. So this is an absolute steal of value in a salary dynasty league. The 1 steal per game is also most he's averaged per game by a pretty good way. So I'm not sure if that will also stick next year, but the assists and elevated scoring are for sure going to be there. Okay. Moving on to our next player, this is one of the other guys that us in the Dynasty community have been waiting on for a while. So moving up 24 spots, finding him at spot number 85 is Onyeka Okongwu.
Yeah, so when Onyeka was drafted in 2020, we've been waiting over the last 5 or so years for either Clint Capella to be traded, as the Hawks are kind of moving towards a younger youth movement, or just completely get removed in the starting lineup in favor of Onyeka. And it finally happened January 20th, 2025. So during that time, Onyeka has averaged almost 14 points per game, 9 rebounds a game, serving as a double-double threat on a daily basis, 3 assists a game, 1.2 steals, and zero point 0.9 blocks, with a pretty impressive 62, 28, and 69 shooting splits. I imagine that free throw percentage will raise. He's a career almost 80% free throw shooter. As a center, which is very valuable, similar to like a Mark Williams. He's a big man who won't necessarily drag down your free throw. And I also love his ability to contribute on those counting stats all across the board. And over that last month that he's been starting, he's ranked 65th. So enjoy the ride. You've already waited 4 or 5 years, depending how long you've held on to him, and this is not the time to sell. You know, now that you get the product that you want, enjoy it while it lasts. And the Hawks have found their center of the future, and it was further evident with them drafting Zachary Risachet over Alex Sarr. So hold Onyeka and enjoy the ride.
All right. That's going to bring us to my first big negative to discuss. Moving down 28 spots, he is barely clinging to top 100 value. Coming in at number 96 is going to be Deandre Ayton. So to you, Dynasty Ayton owners, I feel for you. I only had him in redraft this year, and I never want to deal with this motherfucker again. His stats have been trending downwards since the 2022-23 season and continued that trend this year. Over the last 2 years combined, he has played 95 games. He's just been incredibly frustrating to own and just seems so disinterested in basketball. This is coming from someone who is a former number one overall pick. And there's also issues with tardiness, not giving full effort, being confrontational to teammates and coaching staff. So I would love to tell you all to get rid of this dude immediately. But it's not like these troubles are under the table news nobody knows about. So I doubt you're going to be offered much for him. And I don't want to see you take a very bad offer just to get rid of him, just because we're talking smack about him right now. So for many of you, Ayton's best value to you will be producing for your team the nights he does play. But my goal in an Ayton trade would be basically anyone young that is just outside our top 150, since I doubt somebody would send a top 150 player. So for example, if someone offered me Dalton Connect or Tristan da Silva for Ayton, I am smash accepting that. Get this dude off my team.
Yeah, Andrew, I'll just chime in on Aiden. I mean, I'm pretty known DeAndre Ayton hater over the last couple seasons, and it feels like he's really hit rock bottom here. I mean, I guess it can get worse. He's number 76 on the year, right? But he's got one of those skill sets that is, can inflate your nine category ranking. That high field goal percentage, low turnover type guy, but he's really not doing anything for you besides scoring and grabbing some rebounds. I mean, he's averaging 14 points per game and barely 10 rebounds. Just made it to one block per game, but for somebody who doesn't shoot almost any threes, I mean, you need something else from him. If he's not going to shoot threes, he needs to be blocking shots, and if he's not blocking shots, he needs to be shooting threes. He's not doing either. Aiden is, like you said, best will be most valuable on your own team. Not going to be able to get much from him in a trade. Just kind of somebody you have to deal with if you want to take the production. But also, like you said, if you want to get rid of the headache and kind of swap for somebody with more upside, I don't blame you either, because I think it's only downhill for Aiden from here. I don't think he sees this big of a role on any other team, or maybe again once Klingon is ready to go. So.
All right, that takes us to this next one, which is a fun one. We got someone who rose up 35 spots and is creeping up on the top 100. So coming in at number 113, that's right, a former draft pick from the 50s, a second round draft pick, a very late second round draft pick, is well inside our top 150. That's going to be Toumani Camara.
Oh man, I have been talking about Toumani Camara all season, Andrew. He's a steals menace. He's creeping his way towards the top 100 on the year in nine category rankings. He's at 104. He's just been a rock solid contributor for quite literally any build, and this is even before he took on this huge role that he's playing now in Portland. These out of position steals at the power forward slot have just been so good all season. I remember when he was under like 8 or 9% owned on Yahoo. I think he's around 40 now, maybe 39% or something like that. Earlier in the season, and I'm sitting there, and he's in a couple of the buy sell videos I did. I think he might have been in three of them, where I'm like, why is nobody rostering this guy? And this is before he crept his way up the rankings, but like, okay, the 9K ranking isn't there. He's shooting low 40s, which I think he's brought up now. But the steals are just rock solid every single night. He's got a role on this Blazers team. He should be much closer to the top 100 than 113, in my opinion, factoring in his age and role. And I'm surprised you guys have him lower than I do at 126 and 115. I think he's a pretty rock solid. I keep saying rock solid, but and this is going to be a theme here for a couple other guys that I'm talking about. Name value, I think, is something that's considered a lot in the dynasty space. And if Toumani Camara had higher name value, I think he would be like, I don't know, like in the 80s or something like that. Like he really, it just, there's a lot of narrative shifting and stuff that goes on in this space. And I think if Camara was like on the Lakers or something like that, I think maybe he would be ranked a lot higher than what he is.
Rex, you know that trade you did with the Jail Blazers and Bubble? He asked me about it, and I was like, dude, why would you do that? He's like, I think Salon is just as good of a prospect as Tumani. I was like, You can't do that, man. I know Salon is younger for your team, but in terms of production, you want someone like Salon to be like a Toumani Camara when you already have it on a good contract. So, good win for you there. I tried to warn him.
Yeah, I think that
Um,
deal. What was that deal, Mitch? It was like Grady Dick and Salon for Camara
Hawkins
and
and Hawkins and
Jordan
Toumani.
Hawkins. Yep, exactly. And
And I was
really,
like, Hawkins is just like Grady Dick now. Like Grady Dick is not a standard 12 team guy. And he provides a very similar stat set, maybe a
yeah.
little bit more steals, but
And I mean, to be
yeah.
fair, this is right on the cusp of Camara breaking out. I mean, this is something I've really been looking at. He's really somebody I've had my eye on all season in redraft. And there was a couple opportunities for me to grab him in some dynasty leagues, and I made sure to capitalize on that when I was able to. And now it's really kind of paying off. He's really been taking off here in the last week or two. Please pick him up in a redraft league if you play a category. I mean, he under 40% on Yahoo is ridiculous. Even in 10-team leagues, he's probably useful with those steals. So please grab him.
Like you said with the name value, Braxton, I think it's because he was a late draft pick. He was a 50s draft pick.
Yep.
Imagine if Tari Eason was producing these exact same numbers, how much people would be losing their freaking minds right now.
Yep.
So good point by you. So let's move on. We're going to go down just one spot to number 114. Rising up 21 spots is Jaden McDaniels.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and talk about Jaden McDaniels. So last year there was a lot of hype with him coming into last season as like a potential toolsy stock specialist that can give you 1 3 a game, one block a game, and 1 steal a game. And it looks like we were just as a dynasty community 1 year too early on that. And this year he's averaging almost 12 points a game, 1.8 assists, 1.4 steals, which was a huge uptick to I believe he wasn't even averaging a steal a game last year, and zero point 0.9 blocks. So he's good for 83rd in the season. And lately, with the Julius Randle injury, he's been asked to take up that offensive load. And he's in the top 40 over the last month, scoring over 15 points per game. So 4 points above his average for the season. And lastly, sometimes we forget how young he is. McDaniels is only 24 years old. He's someone that we kind of thought has been in the league for so long, which he has. He was drafted as a freshman from Washington. Uh, but 24 years old, he's a 5 year veteran in the league, and he is a great buy if people have still forgot about him. So make sure you have him on your radar. He's a great toolsy 1 1 and 1 guy. And yeah, you just want to pick him up if someone hasn't forgotten. So yeah, Jaden McDaniels, everyone.
Mitch, I'd love to ask you because he's always kind of been in that range of the 1-1-1, but his problem is he didn't really do anything else, right? And he's really been a cardio guy for a decent portion of his career to this point. Do you think this is real, or do you think it could be a byproduct of DiVincenzo and Randall and just kind of the lack of depth that it has on a nightly basis right now, starting, Jalen Clark the last few games, for example.
Yeah, Jalen Clark has looked really good. I know he's a SoCal guy from UCLA, but going back to your point on a Jaden McDaniels, a big reason I believe for him raising his value is not only the steals, which fluctuate, and blocks that fluctuate over the year. It's a highly variable stat, but his rebounds have upticked to almost 6 a game, coming from, I believe, 3.5. And I think it's a byproduct of Karl Anthony Towns moving into New York following that trade. So, not just that 1 month run with Randall out, he's been pretty consistent grabbing those rebounds, which has inflated his value quite a bit. And the scoring, of course, those flashes are just a plus, as I don't believe Randall is a great long-term option for them, and he looks to play really well with Naz Reid.
Very good. I mean, the past few players in a row that we've discussed are some role players, and that's kind of just the area of this list we're into right now. So we started off with superstars, second, third tier scoring options or just team options. Now we're moving on to those like complementary role players, which brings us to our next player. Took just a small drop of 5 spots, which I wouldn't be too alarmed about. Coming at number 117, Christian Braun.
Yeah, Andrew, I love talking about role players, man. I probably can go on for hours about, players outside the top 200, and just a big fan of talking about role players, even more so than the star guys. Christian Braun is one of my favorite guys to talk about. I think I've talked about him on the last, like, maybe two or three of these that we've done. I'm kind of annoyed he's fallen down in the rankings. I realize that that's similar to a couple of the other guys in this list. It's more of a byproduct of some guys passing him in the rankings as opposed to a knock on him. But similar to Camara, if this guy had more name value, he'd be much higher in the rankings, I think. He's ranked 81 on the year in 9 category leagues. And I know I've said this before, but it was always, the sentiment with him was, oh, where's the fantasy value going to come from? What is he going to do that provides solid 9 category value? And it looks like he's going to score extremely efficiently at 57%, almost 15 points per game. Looks like he's going to get 5 boards per game and then over 1 steal a game. Meanwhile, hitting a three. I mean, he's kind of like he's really he's like Aaron Gordon, but with better percentages. The field goal is around the same area, right? But the free throw was always kind of the issue with Aaron Gordon. And those cutters on that Denver offense can really feast. And Braun is somebody that's really benefiting from being in this high octane offense. And yeah, I just now that he's fully broken out, I don't think he gets the respect that he deserves from really anyone. I think he's here to stay. I don't think this is a fluke or anything.
All right, Brax, we're going to stick with you. Moving to somebody, another complimentary role player, but this one's in a little bit of trouble lately. So moving
Yeah.
down 18 spots to number 126 is Jaime Jaquez.
Yeah, this guy would probably be a lot lower if we were releasing the ranks today. Somebody that's at risk for a DNP coach's decision should be nowhere near the top 100. Davion Mitchell's emergence in Spo's rotation has really hurt him, and Jaquez has really not been much of a fantasy asset, even when he has gotten a ton of minutes. Now, it's possible that Nikola Jovic getting injured gets him on the floor again. And I know he did see the floor tonight, as of the night that we're recording this. But I would have a tough time counting on him this season, much less moving forward. I mean, now Jaquez is kind of in this range of like, similar to how I just spoke about with Braun. It's like, what is he going to be good at? On a 9 category team, and it's kind of up in the air for Jaquez. His appeal was like a little bit of everything, like a Royce O'Neal or a better Najee Marshall type archetype, right? But if he's not seeing the floor, and then when he is seeing the floor, he's not doing anything, there's just not really any reason to justify him where a lot of people value him. So I'd be very concerned.
Yeah, I mean, the hard part about this season, especially more than most, is Spoelstra focusing on his guys. Like, are you a Spo guy or not? Because if you're not a Spo guy, you're not going to be on the floor a lot. He's really tinkered with his rotations a ton this year. And a name you mentioned, Brax, Nikola Jovic. I owned Jovic for a little bit in Dynasty this year, and he was in the Spoelstra doghouse for a little bit too. There was a good stretch of time, pretty much between like November to January, where Jovic was getting healthy scratches every single game. So Spoelstra's been doing stuff like this. If you're in the Spoelstra doghouse, you will not see the floor. He's got weird rotations going on, and I just knew that full effort, good defensive type of player that Davion Mitchell was. He's a Spo guy through and through. If you want to know the definition of what a Spo guy is, Davion Mitchell is a very, very good baseline to indicate that off of. So I hope this isn't a Chris Duarte situation. If you remember Chris Duarte, he was an older rookie. He hit the ground running. He played really well in year one. Then in year two, it was, okay, this guy's not that special. And then he's pretty much just phased out of the league at this point.
That's
I think
scary.
Jaquez is more talented than that. I think he should be fine. But I want to attribute this more to Spoelstra having some crazy rotations this year as opposed to a Chris Duarte situation.
That's really interesting. Duarte had drafted higher than Jaquez too. Duarte was, I believe, 14th overall and was supposed to go even higher than that. Whereas Jaquez, I believe, was kind of a reach at
He,
15, right?
yeah, he was like something around that. Like he was outside the lottery, just outside.
Yeah, that's that's. I'm not gonna say panic, but that's kind of concerning to that parallel you're making there. They're not the same player, obviously, but very similar situation.
Yeah, we have seen something like that happen before. So just keep your eyes peeled. I think Hawkes should be fine, but that's sometimes the risk with these older rookies where that can happen. But let's move on to a rookie, a current rookie who is not old. He took a pretty good jump here. So moving up 33 spots to number 143. That is going to be Isaiah Collier. So, I mean, look who snatched the starting point guard job in Utah. I mean, prior to his rookie season, I watched Collier in person twice. First was early in his tenure in USC. This was in November of 2023. And second was in Summer League this past July playing for the Jazz. So in our first viewing of Collier, Mitch and I identified issues with shooting, decision making, and playing with a bit too much chaos. Between those viewings from late 2023 to the summer of 2024, I really did not see that much progression in Collier. So it seems that some G League time was really what was the most beneficial to him. He took over the starting point guard job for the Jazz a couple of months ago and has never really looked back. And the shooting issues 100% still remain. He is not shooting well in any area right now. Under 30% from three, under 43% from the field, under 70% from the line. That is not good. He really is more of a downhill scorer. That's where he makes his living, is in the paint at the rim. He's a little bowling ball, kind of built like a Kyle Lowry, but does not move like that. He moves more like a Jaden Ivey does. But the passing has been fantastic, and he has been producing some steals, both of which we did expect him to be good at coming out of college. And lately, he's really been turning it up, averaging 12 points per game and 10 assists per game over his last 10 games. And we just got to remember the talent pedigree. He was a top recruit in the nation coming out of high school. So what we're seeing here is likely very real, especially because the areas he's good at are the areas we expected him to be good at. So I don't really see this as a byproduct of Utah tanking. I think they did get a steal in value with Collier. We just absolutely need to see the shooting improve. The shooting is quite abysmal at the moment. All right, we're going to take it down just 2 spots. Someone who dropped down 23 spots to number 145, Kyle Kuzma.
Yeah, I really like Kuzma on this Bucks team. It seems like he's trying again. He was having an unbelievably terrible year in Washington compared to his previous seasons. His field goal was terrible, a career low at 42, only 28% from three, and then only 60% from the line, which is also a career low. And then on top of that, the assists had vanished in Washington. He is doing slightly better, but on top of just fully taking Chris Middleton's role, he should see more boards and usage with the Bobby Portis suspension. But what you should really be excited about here with Kuzma in Milwaukee is I would anticipate him to be a crucial piece for this Milwaukee team over the next couple years. And with him being on a shallow competitive team like this, it'll kind of absolve him of any risk of resting when you need to count on him, which had kind of been the concern the past couple seasons. So definitely going to be down from his peaks in Washington, but kind of offset with being on that competitive team. I think this is a good move for him, and it's a good move for his overall fantasy floor. Definitely does not have the ceiling that he did in Washington, though.
Very good. All right, so we're starting to creep towards the back end of the top 200 here. We're going to talk about a veteran who has fallen down a bit in our ranks, going down 29 spots to number 157 is Jrue Holiday.
So, yeah, Drew, since the move to Boston, it's only suppressed his value, not only from a dynasty perspective, but also from a category perspective, in a redraft setting. Not too long ago, I believe 2 years ago, when he was on the Milwaukee Bucks, he was seen as that second option. And he used to be a third and fourth round staple in those redraft leagues where you would take him along the lines of like a Jaylen Brown, someone who is going to be productive. His assists have dropped almost cut in half since moving to Boston now. Efficiency from the field has been a problem, albeit on low volume. You want him to get those stocks. So, someone who's known as a defensive menace has not translated into those stock numbers that you'd like. And basically, all his counting stats, points, rebounds, assists, have fallen. And this is the first season in I don't know how long, maybe like 7 or 8 years since the Philadelphia days, where he's ranked outside the top 100. Not a lot to look forward to with Jrue Holiday. If you can still move him for a lottery, like a late lottery pick, I would do so if you can get that. I remember even last year when, there was a huge infatuation of Jrue Holiday, that name value where everyone's like, oh, he's such a great category league player. I believe 2 years ago, we've seen him being moved for like those mid lotto picks in rookie drafts, like as high as six, I believe I've seen in some of our leagues together. And the reason for this dip is not only because of the move to Boston and playing with all these stars, but it's the rise of Peyton Pritchard, which has allowed Boston to preserve Jrue Holiday's minutes and usage until the playoffs. So, something to look forward to is to probably sell him for a younger player if you can still get that back, as the value is only going to continue to dip, in my opinion.
All right. So let's move down a little bit here. We've talked about a couple of guys that have in a row here that have dropped down the ranks. Let's move on to some positive talks here. So moving up 16 spots to number 166 is Rui Hachimura. So despite being a Lakers fan, I generally don't cover Lakers players in videos like this, but I definitely want to give Rui some shine here. So under Coach JJ, Rui is quietly having a career year. He's currently playing 32 minutes a night, which is a career high. And JJ's using him much more as a defensive weapon. That's right. Rui Hachimura as a defensive weapon. Now, the main reason why he's able to do this is Rui's strength. So one of his calling cards coming out of college is he was a lot stronger than most players. He could bang in the post, had a bit of a post game, and was kind of more known as like a bully ball type of scorer. And Redick is using that in a way to allow Rui to be able to bang with big men in the post, namely somebody like Jokic, who he did a great job on over the weekend, and it's really paying off with this type of usage of Rui, both on the offensive end and on the defensive end. So we actually have seen Rui's stocks rise a bit. They're still not great, but they're trending more towards useful rather than useless, which is what his defensive output was for majority of his career. The scoring has remained roughly the same, but that's a talking point here is Hachimura is truly a Mr. Reliable when it comes to efficient scoring. So over his career, you can expect around 13 points per game at 50% from the field. Over the past 2 seasons, he's continued his trend of shooting over 40% from three. So the Lakers front office and fans love him. So as long as he's there, I'd be willing to take a chance on Hachimura in Dynasty just as a consistent option, who is also only 27 years old.
Quick follow-up question on Rui. Would you send a first round pick in a 30-team league for Rui Hachimura?
A late one, yes. I can't remember the one that you ended up getting for him. I don't think it was a late one. I think it was lottery or close to it. So that's a little bit more, a little bit more subjective. But like a 20s pick and onwards, yeah, I would send that for Rui pretty easily because you know exactly what you're gonna get for him.
Big point of contention in the Angle League in the beginning of the season, right? Is Rui got sold for a first, and there was outcries in the league from people calling it an overpay, saying that Rui wasn't worth a first even. And I think that's aged pretty poorly. I believe that's what you guys are referring to, just for
That is
context.
exactly what we're referring to. And yes, so far it has aged pretty poorly. That wasn't like top end first round pick, like, oh, this could potentially have a shot at flag, Jack Jonas, Edgecombe, something like that. No, this is a pick that's probably going to be outside of the lottery, I believe. I'm trying to remember exactly which pick it was, but I don't think it was anything truly substantial.
I mean, but like to me, they were acting like this is like a first round pick for a Mike Conley, like someone who's like 30 years old. You know what I'm saying?
Mike Conley's more than
So
30.
Rui's like only what, 28,
27.
27. Not
27.
even that. He's like entering his prime. He's having like what, top 150 numbers this year, which,
He's in the top
is
125, actually.
wow. Okay, so there you go. Most people would trade a late teens pick for that type of player moving forward. But yeah, he has made some pretty nice strides over this past season.
All right. So now we got to switch from positive back to negative again. So this next player, he dropped 44 spots in our ranking. So coming in at number 184 is Trayce Jackson-Davis. So this year, a friend of the podcast, shout out to Colby, mentioned that Steve Kerr has kind of fooled us all on multiple power forward centers across the year, citing Jordan Bell, Eric Paschall, Marquise Chris, Otto Porter Jr. as some examples. So ever since this was mentioned, I just can't get it out of my mind. And it's starting to look like this potentially could also pertain to Jackson-Davis. So we were treating Jackson-Davis as an almost top 100 option last year. And now this year, he's barely clinging to a top 200 spot. This Kerr Warriors system seems to be able to plug and play pretty much any big man or power forward and have it work. Really, the only bigs that have transcended this system is Draymond Green, obviously, and to an extent, Andrew Wiggins and Kevon Looney. Other than that, the big man position for Golden State has been an absolute carousel of plug and play options. So I think in the future, we all need to be very cautious about Kerr coached power forward centers, as they need to truly be talented enough to transcend the Kerr system, or else he can easily plug somebody else in there instead.
Yeah, Andrew. And when we talk about Trayce Jackson-Davis, the outlook isn't great right now, especially with the recent success of Draymond at the five, playing small ball as the starting center for the Golden State Warriors. I believe since they moved into that lineup, they are 5-1. And the outlook for those backup bigs, it's not great. I know Quentin Post has looked pretty good, but essentially there are three backup fives sharing those backup center minutes. It's Quentin Post, it's Trayce Jackson-Davis, and it's Kevon Looney. And whoever is going to play or whoever is going to be featured in that game is definitely going to be matchup dependent, where a lot of times I've seen in the box scores and I've watched the games, none of them are eclipsing 15 or so minutes. A lot of times it's like 10, 7, and 6, with all three of them being sprinkled in while Draymond plays majority of the center spot. So with Trayce Jackson-Davis, the outlook isn't great. He is good when he plays, but it's not looking great with the Warriors. So you're either hoping for a trade or you have to sell Trayce at his current value right now if you can get something in the top 200.
All right, so let's move on to talk about some risers, some positives here. So only moving down one spot to number 185, climbing up 32 spots is Kelly Oubre Jr.
Yeah, I'll chime in on Kelly. So over the last, I believe, 2 to 3 seasons since he's left the Golden State Warriors, he's been kind of seen as that player who gets turned on waiver wires, because yes, he provides you with those points that are very beneficial for those waiver wire type players, but the efficiency has always dragged him back. But this year, it's his first top 100 season in recent memory because of those huge uptick in steals and that increased efficiency. Probably because Tyrese Maxey and Paul George are being featured in the offense, getting most of the defensive attention, allowing Kelly Oubre to have open threes and better drives in the paint. And he's been a more reliable offensive engine this year over a Paul George and has stepped up in the absence of a Joel Embiid. So I like Oubre in Philadelphia because the opportunity is there. They're very lackluster in the wing position. They're playing, shoot, I'm talking about him later today. They're playing Justin Edwards 25 minutes a game, a guy who is undrafted. So it kind of goes to show how much they value Kelly Oubre. They're going to need him to play big minutes, especially as they're trying to keep a push in playoffs. Yes, the 76ers aren't looking great right now. They may end up tanking, but if Oubre sticks with them long term, they're going to need him, and I believe he's a pretty good fantasy buy, given he's still under 30 years of age.
So that'll take us to our next player. And I got to think that this player is the biggest riser on this update. So coming up 103 spots to number 188 is going to be Max Christie.
So Christie is actually second biggest riser, only short to Goga Bitadze at 109, who sadly we would not be talking about on this podcast. But you guys know I was just starting. I was not just starting. I was really starting to get into Christie even pre Anthony Davis trade.
Mhm.
And this trade, plus a slew of the Dallas injuries that they really run into recently, has really opened up a decent role for him on this Mavs team. He's currently playing the best basketball of his career, albeit I know it's a small sample size. But I would say he's gonna be a major part of this Mavs rotation. Not just for the remainder of this year, but also beyond. Since that Mavericks trade, he's averaging 15 points per game, 5 boards, 3 assists, which is interesting. I don't know if that's going to stick. Over 1 steal per game as well. He's shooting 43% from three and 50% from the field. Don't know if those numbers are going to stick, but he's certainly getting some really nice looks. And yeah, he's just been really awesome. And definitely could see him valuing him higher than 188, especially if you're in a salary league. He's locked in at that nice salary for around 8 million for the next few years. And that salary is a big reason why he's going to be a huge part of this Mavs team moving forward as well. Great get for them in that Anthony Davis trade. I do think he is better than Dalton Connect right now. People are whining about the Mavericks not being able to get Dalton Connect or whatever it was in that AD trade. I think Christie is better. Connect might have a little bit of a higher ceiling, but for what the Mavs are trying to do, Christie is a little bit better. So I'm a big fan of Christie moving forward.
Very good. So now we are going to move outside of the top 200. We're going to cater to you deep league dynasty players now. So moving up 7 spots to number 219 is Moses Moody.
Yeah, if we created this list a couple weeks later, I believe Moses Moody would be in that top 200. And Moses Moody has been a huge reason for the Warriors' success. His ability to stretch the floor, be a switchable defender, and really open up the game for a Jimmy Butler who tends to thrive in attacking closeouts. And he gives the Warriors a pretty formidable three-point threat. And since it's being inserted into the starting lineup, the Warriors are 9-0 because of his great fit along Jimmy, Curry, and Draymond Green. And during those first 3 years with the Warriors, 3.5 years, I don't even think Steve Kerr knew Moses Moody was on this team because he would catch DNPs day after day or game after game. And if he did play, he'd only play like 10 or so minutes. But I'm very glad that Moses Moody is finally getting the shine that he deserves. I've been holding him in multiple leagues now, and I think he's going to be a guy that stays and a potential 12-team staple at the end of your roster if he maintains that 25 to 30 minute per game rotation spot over the last month or so. So with Moses Moody, I'd buy him before people catch on. He's a great three-point threat. He has good steal numbers and some stinky block numbers as well.
All right. Now we are going to move down to number 232. This guy rose up 29 spots. Jose Alvarado.
I don't think it's unrealistic to say that Jose is probably going to be the starting point guard for the Pelicans next season. He's with the Dejounte Murray injury. He's ranked number 105 in 9 categories since Dejounte went down, but he's really got some nice upside on a nightly basis in threes, assists, and steals. Really nice short-term boost there, but also a really nice low-end asset with a decent floor on a nightly basis as that backup point guard with a presumed healthy Pelican squad. But then also has that really nice upside when the Pelicans are banged up. So big buy target for me if you're making a playoff run. And don't be too upset with his future prospects either, just because he's a nice low end assist and steals guy. He did just sign a 2-year extension with New Orleans, and I think it's a great spot for him to be in. One, because the medical staff seems to be terrible, but also he's a big part of that locker room, and he's going to have a role pretty much regardless. So
All right, Braxton, we're sticking with you.
nice.
A player who is making his first appearance in our rankings, coming in at number 246, is Keon Johnson.
Yeah, there's a bunch of Nets guys that are kind of fighting for, I think, future rotation spots. Not just in this year, but beyond, right? You got Keon Johnson, you got Jalen Wilson, Zaire Williams, Tyrese Martin, Tosan. Elwama and even Killian Hayes now, who's on a 10-day. And I think Keon Johnson is probably going to come out on top. And I know that's easy to say just because he's starting most nights now, right? But he looks really good out there. He's taken a couple years to develop, and they I believe he was originally a Clippers draft pick, and he was drafted as a project. And he's really starting to pan out now. He's kind of finding his own. He can score. He can dish the ball. He can get the steals. Now, it's curious to see what happens when Cam Thomas comes back in the fold, how much usage Keon Johnson is going to continue to see. What's interesting to me, though, is the Nets are winning games, and they're making a run for this play-in with Keon Johnson as one of their main options on offense, which I think is a good sign for him and his future prospects. So Keon Johnson is a nice low end buy for me, and he could be on waivers in a lot of dynasty leagues, if depending on your league size.
All right. Now we're going on to number 256. He rose up 41 spots. This is going to be Jamal Shead. So in regards to a late second round pick in his first year, it really doesn't get much better than this. He's played in all but 6 games for the Toronto Raptors and is averaging 17 minutes per night. So majority of his colleagues drafted in the second round, especially in the latter portion outside of the second round, like outside of the top 40, outside of the first 10 picks, I should say. Those guys are largely in the G League and have barely touched an NBA court. So yes, Emmanuel quickly was hurt majority of the year, but at the trade deadline, the Raptors shipped away Davion Mitchell and Bruce Brown. So this has left Shead as the primary backup point guard. Shead is defensively sound. That's actually what his calling card is coming out of college, was being a defensive specialist, and honestly reminds me quite a bit of his former teammate Davion Mitchell. So if you're looking for a cheap point guard in a deep dynasty league, then Shead's a good option who should also show some improvement moving forward too. All right, on to another rookie. He is making his first appearance on our list. Coming in at number 270 is Justin Edwards.
So for those who don't know who Justin Edwards is, in the 2023 recruiting class, he was a 5-star recruit with ideal size of 6'7" and 200 pounds as a wing. He was a 5-star blue chip prospect going to Kentucky. Unfortunately, that freshman season didn't really go as planned, and as a result, he was undrafted. But now that he's found a new home in free agency with the Philadelphia 76ers, he has largely benefited from a slew of injuries, specifically to like a Paul George, and just essentially a ravaged and bad season for the 76ers. He's been one of the lone bright spots for the 76ers as a young prospect, alongside Jared McCain. And he is actually in the top 150 over the last month. So he's a fun back end of your roster guy that you want to bet on just because of his upside and his pedigree as, a former McDonald's All-American. So Justin Edwards, you can probably get him on your waiver wire. He's young. I believe he's younger than, or he's 21 years old, so he's a little bit older than a traditional rookie. But he has ideal size and a pretty decent fantasy profile if everything hits, and you could probably get him for free. So go ahead and check your wire and grab him if you can.
Now we're going to move to our 30th and final player. So this guy dropped 41 spots down to number 274. That's going to be Tre Jones of the Chicago Bulls. So Tre comes from a lineage of true point guards. He was really the biggest loser of CP3 joining San Antonio in the offseason. Last season for San Antonio, Tre averaged 10 points per game, 6 assists per game, and 1 steal per game, shooting 50% from the field. So he has that typical Jones stat line similar to what his brother Tyus can produce as well. I was really hoping Tre would get traded because he is a great backup point guard for a point guard needy team, and his contract situation is very, very enticing for a contender. But he got traded to the Chicago Bulls, and that doesn't really help him in any way because they have a crap load of point guards on the team. So the primary reason I bring up Tre is he is an unrestricted free agent after this season. So pay very close attention to where he goes. If he lands on a team that has no backup point guard, then I love that value. He can provide his clean efficiency stats while racking up some points and assists. I tried to get him now or this offseason before he signs somewhere, because people are probably still low on him right now. He's playing on a bunch of teams that or 2 teams so far that have log jams at the point guard position. So it'll pay off big time if he lands somewhere that does need a point guard, whether it's a starting point guard or even a backup point guard. If he goes to a point guard needy team, then that's a big win for you. And he's an unrestricted free agent, so he obviously has the freedom to go wherever he likes. So that's 30 players covered today. We are discussing their movements, whether it be a positive rise in movement or a negative drop in movement. But if we did not discuss a player of yours today that you wanted to discuss their movement with us, then join our Discord and you can talk with us directly. The link for that will be in the description below. Make sure to check out the Dynasty Ranks, anglefantasybasketball.wordpress.com. Thank you for tuning in today, and we will see you all next time.